Our conversation today is going to be on separation. Just a reminder to everybody that if you want to ask me questions, you can text them to me. There will also be breaks where Tom opens up the forum for discussion, so I'll be able to actually hear you if you prefer to ask a question verbally. And a reminder again that you can ask any question that you like. Just text it to me and I will answer you as best I can in between our conversations. All right, so we have a quote every day that we start with, and this one is from John Philip Kemble, who says, "When late I attempted your pity to move, why seemed you so deaf to my prayers? Perhaps it was right to dissemble your love, but why did you kick me downstairs?" And so this person is saying, why didn't you hear me? Why were you deaf to my prayers? Even though I tried to pity you, which I think was a way of talking about having compassion for you. I attempted to be compassionate. I attempt to cajole you with my prayers. And maybe ultimately I couldn't get your attention. So I dissembled your love. I let go of you. But in so doing, you kicked me down the stairs, maybe not literally, but metaphorically. And this is often, I think in this short poem, these are often the pains and the trials and tribulations that we suffer through when we separate from a relationship that's not working for us any longer. And the path to intimacy is often paved with separations, and that can come in small separated moves where, we say, well, I just need my space, or I just want to be with friends or other family members or do something different than my partner wants to do, or it can be for a night or a temporary separation or a formal one for weeks. So choosing when and why you need space and separation is really important so that you're honest with yourself and honest with your partner about that. And this type of separation can be an assertion of independence. It can be sometimes it can be an immature move because we don't know how to effectively emotionally separate by way of a conversation. But it can support personal psychological health, and that will then support the psychological health of the relationship. So it's important to ask yourself why you want the separation that you are evoking. Is it really from the solid part of yourself where you know that you really need to get away from this person so you have some perspective? Or is it an immature move where you're storming out the door and saying, I never want to see you again, and it's because you can't manage your feelings in that moment, and rather than telling your partner the truth about that and being vulnerable about it and saying, I need to slow down this argument, or I need to just stop for a few minutes and breathe, or I'm feeling really scared and I want to lash out at you and I want to run out of the room and slam the door and not come back. But instead, can we sit here together? Can you hold my hand? Can we just be in the same room where I settle myself down so I can talk more reasonably about what I need? These are better choices than running away. So separation, when it's done well, is not a running away move. It's a move of self-preservation and a move that supports the relationship's health, whether or not you ultimately are going to break up or not. So if you can think about for a moment any times you've separated from a current or past partner, whether it involves sleeping on the couch or taking time out in the relationship, what feelings come up for you and how are they resolved? So this doesn't count if your partner's snoring and you have to go sleep in another room. Although that does resolve your sleep situation. You'll sleep better. But what does it feel like when you sleep on the couch or you sleep in another room because there's been an argument or something gets unresolved? I know that can be a very painful, lonely feeling. It can make me feel like I I think it can evoke old childhood feelings of, being alone in a bedroom and nobody coming when, as a child feeling like I needed warmth or comfort. But of course my parents didn't know I needed that, so they couldn't provide it for me. But think about what that's felt like for you, and if you're willing to share that with us, please do. So, if we give ourselves and most people the benefit of the doubt, we recognize that separations come from a wish to gain perspective, which implies that at least one person has been codependent, controlling, or compliant, or maybe violent, or has been lying to us or cheating on us, or something has gone on that is forcing a sense that I really need to separate from that person. I need to get away from this person, and it's because something is not right for me. So we want to make sure, and I want to communicate to you how important it is to not make assumptions and not to just mind read what you think is going on with your partner, but to really make yourself explicitly clear, to make your needs known explicitly, to say, I cannot live with X, Y, or Z anymore. I have to walk away. I need separation. I need you to sleep in the other room, and this is why. It's a form of taking care of myself. Because having that kind of autonomy is crucial for genuine love, and it doesn't mean whether I'm asking for the separation or my partner is. When your partner asks for it, it's imperative also that you honor that you not fight with them or cajole them or try to get them to stay out of your own insecurity, but that you really honor their need to take a breather, to take a look at what the situation is. So somebody says, my sense of self-worth is repeatedly compromised because of my tendency to attract men who aren't emotionally available. I'm trying to figure out what it means to love myself so I can attract a partner who is sustainable. I'm not sure why loving yourself is such an abstract concept. Well, I think it is abstract because if you are not fully internally integrated, if you have a sense of numbness or emptiness or kind of chronic low-grade depression internally, I mean in the core of your body and your being, if you don't have a true sense of self, that means that the circuitry in the brain and the body are somehow disconnected. And these disconnects happen along the way, whether they happen in infancy and it feels like it's always been that way, or there's a remarkable event in childhood that occurred where something bad happened, you were bullied or you were hurt by somebody or scared. Those systems will uncouple. They'll fall away, and when they fall away on a neurobiological level, meaning the brain and the body are not connected the way they're meant to be connected, you will feel a lack of sense of self. And so this concept of self-love or self-care or self-esteem, even self-compassion, can be an abstraction. We don't know where to grab onto that because it feels vacant internally. And so that requires a very specific kind of psychotherapy and lots of work, if possible, in a 12-step program, if it's appropriate and available for you, where you start to have an integrated sense of yourself. And that means you can start to feel impulses in your body, that you know when I ask you how you're feeling right now, you don't give me a thought. You can locate that feeling in your chest. Either there's tightness or there's an expansiveness if you feel joy, or you feeling a tightness in your solar plexus, which is the center of your being, or you feel sick in your gut, or you feel shame in your gut. These are bodily based feelings that let us know that we have a sense of self, that we're okay, not okay. Somebody says something and it doesn't feel right because it doesn't feel right in the body, not because it sounds like a messed up thing to say, because you actually register it viscerally as inappropriate or wrong. And so the more you can make contact with yourself in a therapeutic setting, Jessie, the more you will start to have a sense of what it means to love yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself. And the less you'll be looking for that from outside of yourself with another person. So if you are currently in a relationship, let your partner know you affirm the value of mutual autonomy to make personal decisions that advance individual psychological health. So this is part of healthy conversation in a relationship, and this is a conversation you might want to have going into a relationship to say, one of my values is I really need time to myself to figure out what I need, what I want, and I will communicate that to you. That's a value I have in relationship. But I can't feel constrained that I don't get to have time on my own or time to think about things or time to go to my mother's house if I want to, that I really need to be able to stand on my own 2 feet so I can better meet you as a partner. Amanda says, when a separation occurs, depending on the partner, it is felt like a very small version of me is left. And I would say that's true. There's a tiny part of us that feels abandoned or like we're losing some aspect of ourselves. And that speaks to the strength of the attachment processes, where we're actually growing attachment synapses and connections to the other person. So when we lose another person, whether it's through separation or death, it physically feels painful. Physically, it feels like losing a limb, because these areas in the brain start to feel like they're being assaulted or atrophying. I typically can't get words out and feel the walls closing in on me. I feel my whole body tense, and it becomes hard to take care of basic needs like preparing meals for myself or getting in enough movement for a few days to a week after something like that has happened. So this is an extreme reaction to losing somebody. And I don't want to just talk about it as being abandoned, because we talk about abandonment issues a lot, and that abandonment can activate early structures in us of having been abandoned as children, and that's very real. But when a partner leaves us because they need to for their own mental health, or we've asked them to leave for our own mental health, it's physically painful, as you've described, and that's actually a natural reaction to the situation, even if the person has been, terrible or cruel or abusive. We see the good in people and the bad in them. And I think women especially, tend to see the good over and over again and hope against hope that things are going to work out, when often, the handwriting's on the wall that it won't. So if you love somebody, and if when they leave you have a reaction where it feels like your head's spinning, you can't see straight, you can't function, that's a normal reaction of the organism. And this is why it's important to have people we can rely on, whose prefrontal cortexes remain online during these kind of upsets, where we can get consultation and say, am I doing the right thing? Or remind me why I'm doing this. Or I can't make a meal for myself. Can you come get me? Can we go to dinner? Can you come make me a meal? We shouldn't have to function on our own when it comes to relationship. We are wired for relationship. We have tenacious attachment patterns for relationship, and we are in grave pain when we lose relationship. And even if you think about the atrocity yesterday, the massacre yesterday in Orlando, which I can't help but bringing up here, the separation of the loss of those people is profound, so much so that I was in tears when I heard about this yesterday, knowing that I probably didn't know somebody, but I may know somebody who knew somebody. But even though I didn't know anybody directly, I can feel the pain of that loss, of that mother who's lost a son or daughter, of that lover who's lost a lover, of that friend who's lost a friend, or a friend of a friend. And so feeling it from afar tells you just how powerful these places of empathy, compassion, love, attachment are in us as human beings. So when it impacts us directly, it's devastating. And that's what you're talking about, perceptual difficulties that are devastating. Robert says, I relate a lot to what you said about the vacancy one feels and disconnectedness between body and brain because of repeated childhood trauma, emotional and physical. Can you elaborate on what therapy is effective for this condition? Well, the most important thing is that you have a relationship with a therapist that you feel comfortable with, that you feel is kind, loving, that is really present with you and sees you. Because therapy, when it's working well, is an impersonal love relationship. So I say impersonal because the therapist doesn't know a whole lot of things about you, and you certainly know little to nothing about them. But it's about us meeting another with our humanity. So there's a saying about the therapist or the client feeling felt by the therapist. So when you are looking into your therapist's eyes, do you have a sense that they're with you, that they see you, that they care about you, that they're kind, that they really feel what you're going through? Because those processes are corrective in and of themselves. And most people won't sit still in therapy long enough to have that experience with the therapist where they start to feel like they love their therapist or their therapist matters to them. Sometimes we feel too scared of getting dependent on a therapist, which is precisely what needs to happen so that eventually you can become independent and say goodbye to your therapist. But that doesn't happen in a year or two. Sometimes it can take 3, 5, 10 years, depending on your trauma. So finding a therapist and sitting still with somebody that you feel is actually helpful to you is the first thing. The second thing is that there are all of these trauma modalities available to us today. So you want to find a therapist who is trained in something called EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is a premier protocol for treating major trauma like post-traumatic stress disorder. So if somebody's trained in that or highly skilled in that and you have trauma that was physically, emotionally abusive, bullying, things like that, it will help enormously. Therapists that are trained in somatic experiencing or sensory motor psychotherapy, where they're really tracking what's happening in your body. There are many other modalities also, like emotionally focused therapy, brain spotting. I can't think of any others off the top of my head right now, but therapists will list if they have a specific protocol they're trained in on their websites, and you can ask people. And I also suggest that you make time to meet with a number of different therapists. Go have, 2, 3, 4 sessions with people until you have a sense of, oh, that's the person that feels right for me. Because everybody's not right for everybody. I always say that you could walk into my office and I remind you of your mother or your sister you don't like, and it doesn't matter how kind or considerate I am, you're going to have a hard time connecting with me. So it's not right for you, because therapists are people, first and foremost, and we have all of our, foibles and shortcomings as well, and you have to feel comfortable that you're going to be able to work those things out with the therapist, and that's part of what changes this disconnection and this vacantness internally. It's about the human connection. So why does a partner's desire to assess the relationship without our participation feel so threatening? That is a loaded question, because that feels like anything that could happen in childhood where, parents are dismissing of a child, or they're making decisions and the child has nothing to do with it or knows nothing about it, and they're subjected to it, whether it's a decision to divorce and break up the family, or deciding that you're going to change schools or what you're going to wear. That is a violation of trust and respect of that child, because that child's needs and very sense of developing personhood are not being taken into consideration. So when somebody does something without our participation, and we have a vow of, let's say, monogamy, or we have an agreement that we're not going to make big decisions without each other, and somebody goes behind somebody's back and does that, it's a fundamental violation of trust. And when we cannot trust, we can't love. It makes it very, very difficult to love deeply. Not love as in I love you because I love who you are as a person, but love you as open my heart to you, romantic love, sexual expression of love. And, aligned with that is the pain of judgment in childhood, whether it was a parent or a teacher who falsely accused us of something or just took matters into their own hands without asking us about it. And especially if this happened chronically and repeatedly. But even if we've buried that painful memory, we will have a sense of wounded trust, and it will come up somatically again. So you might not remember these things that happened to you, but the body remembers. So you will remember it. You'll have a visceral experience in your body. So separation from lovers, trigger all of our woundedness, all of our issues come to the fore. So Jesse says, what's the deal with the paradox of sexual relationships versus platonic? Most of us would never dream of impeding our friend's autonomy, but different story if it's a romantic relationship. Or maybe you just answered that, childhood trauma, okay? Right. It's true, we wouldn't get in the way of our friend's autonomy because we don't have the same emotional charge with them. The deeper we love, the closer we get to someone, the more dangerous it becomes because we are putting ourselves in the hands of someone, and we're making ourselves extremely vulnerable, and that person can hurt us worse than anyone on the planet. So that is the paradox actually of loving deeply, that if I love deeply, then you are going to hurt me and vice versa. If I love deeply, I'm going to be disappointed and I'm going to be disappointing to you. And the question is, are we really making the commitment ourselves to take care of that other person and to be in that other person's care? Because that's what's required, is that both parties are in agreement that they are in each other's care. They're actually going to care for the other the way that they would want to be cared for. And if you pick a partner who's impaired, who doesn't take good care of themselves, they're not going to be able to take good care of you either. So does that person really have your back? Even though they're angry, even though they want to leave the house, are they saying, you know what, I can't be in this space anymore, I'm leaving, but I will call you in an hour, or I'm not going to drive my car like a maniac, or I'm not going to disappear for you or for hours or days on end. That I might stay away for days on end, but I'm going to let you know that I'm okay because I don't want you to not be able to sleep or eat or function, because that becomes an act of cruelty. So that is the distinction. The deeper we love, the more dangerous it becomes because we're vulnerable, and the more it really brings to the fore our childhood places where we're wounded. Question from Vonita. I have a close friend who is dating someone for a few months and has asked that he make contact with her once a day. If he misses a day or two, she jumps to the conclusion that he's separating from her and experiences extreme loss and pain when she needs a lot of support to function. What's the best way to support this kind of situation? Well, I would say that this person has some very serious attachment issues, and she's got a wounded attachment system where she gets highly dysregulated if this guy's not calling her. And, it's a lot to ask someone that you're dating for a few months to call you every day. It really is a lot. It's a burden on that person because they don't get to call you because they're thinking about you or they're excited to see you or they want to. It starts to become a have to right off the bat. And that is a deficit that she has that she really needs to tend to. So if she identifies as a relationship or love addict, I would recommend that she consider going to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous and getting a sponsor right off the bat, getting phone numbers, and calling people in program rather than burdening this other person to call her every day. And again, it may be a deeper therapeutic issue, so she should seek professional help. So this headline says that you should change your relationship to the person, not change the person. And so all of us think that we're in a relationship with the wrong person. We all think we married the wrong person because our issues come up in relation to whomever we're at. And so changing partners the way you change your shirt is a bad idea. Changing your relationship to that person is a good idea. So it can be legitimate to separate when aspects of the relationship need to change and you feel like your partner is not keeping their agreements to make those changes. Or maybe you're not keeping your agreements to make those changes because you can't or you don't want to. That's a sign that you should definitely consider separating from the relationship. If separated lovers reunite without change, then nothing has changed and they'll face the same problems over and over again. In Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about pulling a geographic. So leaving, going back to the same thing, it's business as usual. That begets a cycle of it can almost be like a domestic violence cycle because the cycles will start to shorten over time and the arguments will start to get more, angry, rageful, and potentially dangerous. So, you have to ask yourself, why am I separating? Why do I need this space? What am I going to accomplish during this time? It shouldn't just be a passive-aggressive move to get back at your partner. It should be as a result of a real desire on your part to figure out what's true for you. So, the question here is, how can partners change a relationship when they're apart? And one of the answers to that is what I was just saying, is that you have to examine your own thoughts about the other during the separation and ask yourself, how much of what I am feeling, experiencing, noticing is a projection onto that person? Am I projecting my anger onto them, or my own unavailability, or my desire and my neediness to be taken care of when this person never said they were going to do that, and they never advertised they were going to do that, and yet I keep wanting them to show up in a way that's my construction of them, not who they really are? Is this about my expectations or my assumptions? Because it's usually all of those things. Unless you have somebody who gets into a relationship with you and gives you like a manifesto that they are going to plan all your vacations and take you to dinner and romance you, several times a month and buy you new clothes. Take your dry cleaning to the dry cleaner every week. Like, they explicitly lay out the things that they're going to do. Then you're probably going to be in trouble, because if you have all those ideas in your head and you haven't checked it out with that person when you're dating them, then you're going to marry them and wonder why they're not doing all these things, and then hate them for not doing it because, oops, you forgot to tell them that those are things you wanted and needed in a relationship. And then you'll start badgering that person, trying to get them to do those things for you. And then you're in a really vicious situation where they can't win. And no matter what they do, they can't win, because they'll do small things for you that you don't recognize because they're not the things that you wanted done. So there's a way to correct that, which is by getting really honest with yourself about what you wanted that person to be versus who they are, and then talking to them about what you would like. Is it possible for them to do these things for you, so that you can start being in gratitude for what they do and what they can do, versus really attacking them for what they can't do and never said they would do. So I'm sure we all have many, many examples of this. I think I've probably shared this on another webinar, but I had this fantasy that my husband would plan all our vacations for us. And it ends up that I mostly do the planning of our vacations because he's busy, he's got a lot going on, and it's just not something that he can get to. But my fantasy was that somebody would plan my vacations, I would just be told where I was going, I would pack up my suitcase and go to the airport. And that's like a little girl dream in a way. That's not an adult dream. Now, sometimes we plan them together. It's not solely on my shoulders, but I've learned to be grateful that I can even go on vacation, that I have somebody that wants to travel, and start to see the things that he does do, not what he doesn't do. And there are a million little things like that that all of us experience all the time. So it's worth taking stock of what our expectations are, and how we sort of badger our partners into being our projections that they can't possibly be. And these awarenesses will point you in the direction of where your healing has to come. So whenever we start to blame, shame, get angry at the other, we really have to look at our projections, our expectations, and our assumptions, so we can clean up our side first before we can talk to our partners about what we really think might be their shortcomings or what they might be missing. Okay, any questions about that last bit about broken trust, wounded trust? All right, so if we give up on transforming our own personal patterns, if we demand to be exactly loved as is without course correcting, we're not only giving up on our relationship, but we've given up on our inner relationship with ourselves. And that is a very entrenched pattern. There's nothing wrong with me, it's all you. You have to change. I'm fine. What's missing in that is the understanding that relationships are dynamic systems, and who we are when we meet and fall in love is very different than who we are 2 years later, or 5 years later, or 15 years later. So if we're not in a constant process of self-assessment, a constant process of conversation with our partner, a constant process of really forcing change upon ourselves, because that's what relationships are for, is to grow and change ourselves, then we're really digging in our heels and we start to perpetrate a form of emotional terrorism on our partner. The stance becomes, that's just how I am and I'm never going to change and you just have to love me the way I am, which I don't think is love. I think it's a form of tyranny, as opposed to saying, gosh, yeah, I used to hold those beliefs, or I'm really afraid of, let's just use the travel metaphor. I'm afraid to travel, but I want to stretch out of my comfort zone. I want to try something different. I trust my partner. I feel safe with her or him. And so I'm going to stretch out of my comfort zone and try that thing and do something a little bit different because this person is here so I can grow. We don't get into relationships to stay stagnant. That's not the nature of them. People that stay stagnant in relationships are generally miserable because they're not using their partner effectively to grow and change and move more towards secure functioning with each other and with themselves. So anytime we learn how to talk about our boundaries, our needs, or our thoughts openly, we're creating a healthy atmosphere, and that's when genuine eroticism becomes reachable. Without it, it's impossible. You get contempt and hatred and disgust and anger and just kind of this crusty old dug-in feeling with somebody. So even though these conversations can be painful and difficult, when we're really listening to each other, when we're really open and present to possibility and our hearts open, that's when we move through the difficult waters into more open, placid waters where we can be loving and sexual and erotic. And that's the place where, ultimately we grow and change also. So to have these experiences of, opening up and then shutting down and being angry and working through the difficulty, even if it requires an emotional separation in the moment or an actual separation in sleeping spaces or a more, longer term separation, it's in that space that we grapple with our own selves. We look at what we really want and we bring that to our partners and hope that they can also bring some insight about themselves. And then you have a functional, healthy relationship. So Jesse says, how can you tell the difference between communicating needs in a healthy way versus being needy? Well, I think when we're needy, we're not communicating. We are acting out. And saying things like, will you call me every day? Or please don't leave. Or do you really have to go to that thing tonight? Or you're always doing that with your friends on the weekend. That sounds needy, 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 as opposed to can we sit down and talk? It really means a lot to me if we have dinner on Monday nights together, because I was always alone as a kid on Monday nights. And dinner on Monday nights is important. Can you not schedule anything on Mondays? That's a yes or no answer. Or let's plan our weekends every Wednesday so that I know what you're doing and you know what I'm doing. And if it means that you want to play, baseball with your friends every Saturday or go bowling or whatever, surfing, then I know that that's happening. But I also want to know that you're going to make time for me and for us in our relationship. So being healthy is communicating. Is being direct. It's about tolerating your anxiety and your fears and letting the person know what's really true for you versus constantly nipping at somebody's heels by, making demands or whining or snide remarks or letting them know about your disapproval. Because my experience, I think especially with men, it's hard for them to often ask to take time for themselves, or they're assuming that it's okay to take time for themselves. And if they hear any disapproval from women, it really puts them in a bind because they don't want that disapproval, but they also want to go, be with their friends and hang out. So it's not just on, the woman's shoulders either. I think a male has to say to a female, if we're talking about heterosexual relationships, that I just want you to know that, playing soccer with my friends on the weekend is something I've been doing for years. I love it. It's really important to me. I don't have to do it every single weekend, but I do it a lot. And I just want you to know this, being in relationship with me. And if you care about that guy, you'll say, wow, that's really social for him. It's constructive. He's a lot happier when he does it. I'm happy that he's happy. I want him to have that time for himself, just like I want time for my girlfriends. So getting explicit and not letting it leak out in dysfunctional ways is the difference between healthy versus needy. And face it, we're all needy. Stan Tatkin, who's a colleague of mine who wrote a terrific book called Wired for Love, says that we're all high maintenance, that there's no such thing as a non-high maintenance partner. So just get with the fact that you're high maintenance, I'm high maintenance. That's how it is in relationship. But it's how do we communicate that and how do we tend to each other's neediness without acting it out or then shaming each other for being that way. And certainly I want to say also that we're all needy at different times. We can be needy around the death of a parent, anniversary around the death of a parent, or a loss that we've had, or a certain time of year, like maybe Christmas or a birthday when we didn't get what we needed, or maybe summer vacations. I mean, everybody's got their triggers, and so to be able to tell your partner, hey, this is a difficult time of year for me, or this is a difficult holiday, or, when we go to this party and I know that your ex-girlfriend or boyfriend is there, I'm willing to go, but can you please make sure that you don't leave me in a corner standing there so I don't feel so alone, or that I have a sense that I really matter to you and you want to be there with me? That would make a real difference in whether I can have fun at that party or not. So again, neediness is context dependent also. So if you schedule some time with yourself today to share your thoughts about the current state of your relationship with your partner, and recognize each of your contributions and show support for what's working. So it's not just about what isn't working, but what does work well in the relationship, and how do you applaud that and champion that with each other, and where do you and I think it's important to look at where you're enmeshed in your relationship, because in general, if you're in a long-term relationship, you're going to be enmeshed with that person. So what are the ways you can start to pull apart some of that enmeshment and stand on your own 2 feet and be more independent, autonomous, so that you can be interdependent and less codependent, and kind of sticky with each other? So I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts about any of that, the distinction between closeness and separation, because these are paradoxes also, versus enmeshment and what I'm calling stickiness with the other person, because that will get you into trouble. It'll get you into trouble because your sexual desire will start to fall off with that person, because you feel like you don't have a solid sense of yourself. Any thoughts or
What?
questions?
Why don't we open up the phone line so our phone attendees can ask questions? All you have to do is press *6. And Alex, I wonder if you might talk about some of your experience with like formal separations that clients have, some of the parameters.
Sure. Well, there are different types of separation. Sometimes therapists think about something called therapeutic separation, where something's happened that's really egregious, like an intimate betrayal, or somebody is, addicted to drugs or alcohol, or there's been maybe some violence in the household, but the people are not ready to end the relationship, but they are willing to be in therapy in a couples forum every week, and that there are rules around the relationship, when they communicate, how often, when and how they manage the family if there are children involved, and that therapeutic separation is expressly in place with the intention of the couple moving back together. And that can be a really effective way to go to your separate corners and work on your issues without being under the same roof. During therapeutic separation, people are not dating other people, they're not having sex with other people. Their attention is really on getting clear about what they want and what they have to change. Oftentimes when people actually separate without therapy involved and they're just moving out, they're generally on the road to divorcing or ending the relationship. Because again, if you're not working during the separation, then you're really not doing anything. You're not doing anything different, and chances are what that does is give people a clearer and this is the usefulness of it, it gives them a clear sense of, oh, this is what it would be like to be on my own, and this actually feels pretty good, and this is the right thing for me to do. I should have done this a year ago or 2 years ago. So separation is typically, again, on the road to ending, whereas therapeutic separation can be on the road to having a new beginning. So any other questions then about this topic of separation and how it can help you transform yourself, and how also it can be an energy of moving apart and coming together? There can be an oscillation to it, and it happens in moments of the day. We separate every morning when we say goodbye and go off to work. We separate when we hang up the phone and say goodbye to one another during the day. We separate when we go to sleep and close our eyes. So it's waxing and waning all the time, but sometimes there are bigger oscillations than others. And I think the main point here is that when you choose to separate, that you don't do it from an immature place in yourself, that you do it from a mature place, that there's an intention for it, and there's a reason for it that you believe is going to be for everybody's higher good. How can you tell the difference between communicating needs in a healthy way versus being needy? What was the question again? Is that mostly to gain more objectivity? I think I answered that question already. Sorry, I thought I saw a little blurb there. But I want to remind all of you that you can call CHS anytime at 843-9902. That's 310. Our intake counselors are standing by to talk to you if you have any relational issues, especially if you live locally. And they can answer more questions for you also. So on a final note, this is a reminder for you to take a look at Mirror of Intimacy. I think most of you that are listening have been fans of Mirror of Intimacy for a while, so we probably don't have to remind you where you can find the book, or you can write reviews for us. And this book's been winning a lot of awards this spring, so it's been very exciting to watch it take off and take flight. And it's done so because of your support, because you tell other people about it. Tom and I now meet people from all walks of life who've heard of the book or reading the book, or it's been very exciting for all of us. So I hope today you take some time to separate from the world, to separate from your responsibilities, and to think about what you need in your relationship in terms of your autonomy, your independence, because it's a crucial part of being in relationship. We paradoxically desperately need attachment because we will not flourish without it, but we also need autonomy because we won't flourish without that too. And when you're autonomous and you are standing on your own 2 feet, you can love deeply and closely another. But when you're enmeshed with someone and you're propping them up or they're propping you up, and if they move you can't manage, or you fall apart, then you really want to look at the enmeshment, because that creates a real problem in a love relationship. It makes it very difficult to grow. Just imagine if somebody's leaning on you all the time, you can't move, or that person falls down, and none of us want that responsibility. So you don't want to be propping someone up, and you don't want to be propped up. You want to be able to hold hands and walk side by side down the road, not be carrying somebody on your shoulders until you're so burdened you can't stand up yourself. All right, so I hope you have a good rest of the month of June, and I look forward to seeing you. I believe it will be the first Monday in July, which is the 4th, so it won't be July 4th. It'll be the following Monday. So it'll probably be around the 11th or 12th. I can't do math that quickly. But anyway, happy Independence Day to you, and I look forward to seeing you in July. Thank you.